barely made it back from getting the glass of cordial there. Cut it quite fine. Right, we move on to game of the 2025-2026 season now. Ciaran Boyle, I'll start with you. As we said, maybe the quality somewhat lacking during the season, but that didn't leave us short of dramatic games, dramatic finishes, and some great 60-minute highlight reels throughout the course of the season. What was the pick of them for you?
I think the pick for me, I mean, yeah, there was some really good regular season games. Obviously, the Bills Ravens was a real good one to kick off week one. But I'm going to go to the wild card weekend. I know that was a great couple of days of football. And again, I'm going to go back to the Bears Packers game. We all remember how that the Packers were kind of coasting and taking it easy in the first half, and that infamous shot of Love and I think it was one of his old linemen just kind of chilling and grinning and laughing on the sideline as they went up. I think they were up 21-6 at one stage. And I think for everything that it meant to the Bears, I mean, it was just a phenomenal kind of comeback. Everything that went on there. It was the 4th and 8 to Adunze, the finish for DJ Moore. It was just a great moment. And again, we kind of talked at the start about the dilution. Maybe the Chiefs weren't really at it this year. But, you know, when some of the top dogs are down, I mean, we've seen it in the Premier League, you know, when Leicester won the league that year. You know, when the top dogs are down, that's the chance for the other teams to kind of grab that limelight, and that's what the Bears did. Everything about the game was great. Sorry, Kieran, the capitulation from the Packers that just went away from the game. Just nothing went right. The McManus kicks that that didn't go over, and that for me, I mean, it's hard to pick, you know, just one game out of the season, but that one sticks out to me the most. I think probably because it was in the mix of that really great wild card weekend that started off with the Panthers game, when it looked like they were about to get dog walked and they came back. But that's probably the game of the season for me.
Jesus, poor Ciaran O'Donovan. Like this whole podcast is tremendously triggering. He's taking shots like Sonny Corleone at the toll booth. Brian, that's a film reference for you. What was your game of the season? You and Ciaran got to witness one of them at MetLife. Was that MetLife? No, that was at the Link, was it?
No, it was at MetLife. We wouldn't have got out of the Link. I don't think we would have got out of the Link alive if that's right. Sorry, I was in the middle of booking the cinema for me and Shane. We're going to go see Top Gun, Shane. I've never seen Top Gun either. So
Danger Zone.
Danger Zone. Conor, you touched on it earlier that, like, in a roundabout way, it was a compelling season. Was it a great season? And you kind of tongue-in-cheek said you're happy for all the surprise, but then when you get to the back end of the season, you know, the results kind of you get what you expect. But it's the Broncos build for me, and I didn't think it would be. I was torn on that, and I'm sure someone else will probably lob in an NFC West Thursday night clash, which was fantastic and a great comeback for the eventual Super Bowl champions. But this one for me was compelling from the first snap to the very end, because the Broncos were questioned going into the playoffs whether they could do it offensively, and they came up big time in that game. And Bo Nix had a huge game, and Josh Allen had a huge game. And you talk about sliding doors moments, kind of like that 20 seconds before half time in that particular game, where they gave up 10 points effectively. They totally changed the dynamic of that game. The Bills left in control. They were driving at one stage. You go up by double digits. Cook fumbles the ball. Broncos recover. Even prior to halftime, it looks like it's going to go in level pegging. They gave up the big touchdown to Humphrey. Then, you know, crazy decision to try and make a play and try to get into field goal range. Results in a fumble. The ball spins back 20 yards and they get a field goal. And then all of a sudden, they're down by 10. Still come back. Still more turnovers. It looks like the Bills, we can argue whether it was a fumble, whether it was a catch.
Yeah. I mean, as you describe it and all the incidents, it's mad to think that all of that was packed into such a tight period of time. Yeah. What a game. Yeah.
And that Monday, we were discussing whether it was a cut catch, whether it was an interception, and some of us have different opinions on it, and we still do. And in the end, the Bills, yet again, you know, for Josh Allen, like, this is the Josh Allen saga that a lot of us are feeling really sorry for, in terms of he's such a fantastic quarterback. And sorry, Shane, I genuinely believe if the Bills had got through that game and went into Foxborough, they probably inevitably would have won that game and gone to the Super Bowl. I think everybody as a neutral would have loved to see the Seahawks, Buffalo Bills Super Bowl. Not to say that we didn't get a good Super Bowl, but I think the Bills are this storyline. And you spoke about it earlier. In a year where Chiefs were on a down year, the Ravens were on a down year, the Bills weren't to a certain extent. They still were very much in the mix. They went into Foxborough and were 21-0 down, showed their mettle and came back. We all kind of felt was the Broncos were competing, the Bills inevitably would have come out and be victorious. And then the head coach gets fired, within 2-3 days. And then they don't even go external. They bring in essentially the offensive coordinator to be the head coach. is a bit of a strange one for me. Anyway, there you have it. I don't think there's many more games that will have as much drama as we got in a season where not all the playoff games were compelling. That certainly was one of them.
Shane, Sky has got tone on you and he's releasing his missiles, a reference that you won't even get because you haven't seen Top Gun, precisely because you haven't seen Top Gun. He called out Bears 49ers as his game of the season. That's a sneaky good pick, actually. That was a classic game, and probably the one where the Bears showed the offensive capability that they have under Ben Johnson to keep pace with the leaders in the NFC, even though they ended up on the losing end of that one. What was your game of the season, though?
Well, my reaction to a game of the season was definitely on week 4 when I woke up on Monday morning. Ciaran and Kieran was in the other bed in the hotel room we were staying in Dublin, and I woke up to the noise of fuck it anyway, as I was watching the highlight of Packers against Cowboys. So I was like, whenever I think,
how did your audition for Win the Shakes the Barley go?
Wow, it felt like there were 2 Ciaran O'Donovans in the podcast.
I know. I don't think I'll be allowed to drink a clean pint of Murphy's. Or
Tom Cruise and far and away over here.
In fairness to that Bears 49ers game, look, it was a great shootout, and it's one of those games where like everything goes right for both teams all the time until there's one moment where the Bears had to go for the field goal, and it meant that the momentum was gone in that kind of a shootout. And they're always great games, and that really had NFC number 1 seed ramifications. But, and I'm sorry, lads, because I'm just going to take the obvious game of the season here. Brian already alluded to Week 16, Thursday Night Football, Seahawks versus the Rams. Not only was it nuts, the fact that the Seahawks managed to get the victory on the 2-point conversion at the end, which is obviously in overtime, which is kind of the way to do it. The fact that they got the 2-point conversion off the backwards throw to hit off the helmet, which is just picked up by, I can't even remember who the receiver was.
Charbonnet, wasn't it? It was Charbonnet.
I think you're right. Yeah, it was Charbonnet. Just picked it up in the end zone as if it was nothing. The fact that you think of how much we talk with Sam Darnold.
That was the craziest play of the season, hands down. Like
100%. It was nuts. I mean, I talk about Sam, like what we're talking about Sam Darnold. Oh, he threw 4 interceptions against the Rams a couple weeks ago. He threw 2 tonight, and they lost again. And we're talking about the Rams as being probably going to win that division. They would have ended up both in 13 wins the way it worked out, because the Rams ended up bottling it against the Falcons the week after. But maybe they mightn't have done so had it been there. And then we're talking about the Seahawks not having the home field advantage. But it's more fundamentally, we talked to everybody who's from Seattle and San Francisco and said, when was the moment you knew you could win the Super Bowl? It was that night. And even like just Al Michaels, one of the better performances of him in the commentary booth this year. From him just coming in, it was the energy of that moment and the energy of that stadium. And the 12s were definitely reawakened then to end up quite literally being seismic by the time we got to the playoffs. So look, that was by far the game of the season for me, and it's one that I still sort of look back on and watch the highlights of, because it's every time I watch it, I just can't believe it. And we know that's going to be like the biggest chapter. That's going to be the big turning point when the America's game is made about this season. That's going to be the one that they all focus on.
Well, it's all 3 of those games, I think, and it's an excellent point. And I won't dwell too much on mine because it's related to the lengthy soliloquy I had on Sam Darnold early. But I actually had the championship game, the NFC championship game, as my game of the season, because it was the final chapter of that trilogy. And I remember well how we talked about the Seahawks going down to the Rams when they lost a game in which they were well behind, in which Darnold turned the ball over. I think they had 5 total turnovers in that game, and the defense held them in it. And I remember, like in particular, Ciaran O'Donovan, you and I saying, I was actually so impressed that the Seahawks managed to be in that game at the end and actually had a chance to win it when everything was going wrong. And I was kind of starting to think, well, like if they just cut down on the mistakes offensively, they're going to be really, really hard to stop. Then we had that crazy game that you mentioned. But the NFC Championship game for me was the big prove-it game for the Seahawks offense, because the Rams absolutely emptied the tank, went all over the field on that Seahawks defense. It was the one and only time really in the season where we saw them get exposed and saw them get owned by a real offensive juggernaut. And Darnold had to throw for 345 yards, 3 touchdowns. They had to balance that with the running game, and they kind of had to dig themselves out of a hole. They really had to step up, and they did, and they showed us the complementary football that ultimately saw them lift the Lombardi 2 weeks later. Biggest disappointment of the season, and not to be on a downer, but Brian, what was your biggest disappointment of the season just gone?
Yeah, there's a few, Conor. I'm trying to figure out what the right one is, because we're kind of cross-referencing on quite a few tonight. I'm going to go with the Steelers, because they came to Dublin, they won the game, I really enjoyed the press conference. Like we've been to numerous games over the course of the last few years, and you go into the press conference and it's all, you say the appropriate things at the appropriate time, relevant to the game. But there was something really compelling about going into that one. The Mike Tomlin spoke how proud he was to bring the team over. Aaron Rodgers said he thoroughly enjoyed his time here, and I love the way he kind of blew ESPN up in that particular press conference, saying, "I said that I wish we came earlier in the week," and then all of a sudden ESPN were putting out articles saying, "Oh, he's challenging the NFL as to why they can't come to Dublin sooner." He said, "That's not what I meant. I meant is, and I wanted to embrace the opportunity to be in Ireland for a longer period than what we had." And he meant that in a real genuine manner. And then Hayward, who I had the opportunity to speak to in the most unusual circumstance in at the Super Bowl, and he in the toilet in Major Row, spoke about how he'd love to come back to Ireland.
Who broke the bro code there and started the conversation in the toilets? Like, who was the transgressor there? We need to know how to.
It was Cam Hayward. He saw the branding. He saw the Irish show band.
It was Cam Hayward. He saw the. I was like, oh, what's the next word he's going to?
He saw the Irish NFL show branding. But as the season evolved, Conor, we didn't get to see the Aaron Rodgers storylines that I was really hoping we would see. Like they won the division. Sorry, he won the division, but the week prior to that, when they were struggling against the Browns, like they gave the Ravens another shot at it. And you could argue the Ravens are one of the most disappointing factors of the season as well, because like Lamar went to injured. They had all the players there and components to be a really strong side in the AFC. But the week prior to that was really disappointing because they brought in Aaron Rodgers for situations like that where they're down, they're not playing well, they're in the dog pound, and they have an opportunity to go down and win the game and secure the division. They didn't. They win. They go into the playoffs. It's a very, very flat performance. Bear in mind what they would have spoke about throughout the course of the season. We've been here before, as in wild card. We keep getting knocked out. We need to get above and beyond. We've won the division now. We secured a home game as opposed to being on the road in the wild card, and yet they had a really difficult, struggling performance. And the Texans, who didn't give up much the following week, go and beat them convincingly. So for Steelers fans, it's kind of going, where are we? We're in the middle of the pecking order. We can't get a quarterback at the top end of the draft. We're not entirely sure if Aaron Rodgers is coming back. And Mike McCarthy, the head coach, who is a beloved Steelers fan, but people aren't currently enticed by that hire. So for me, the Steelers are back in flux as to where they were 12 months ago.
I'll run through mine very quickly, Ciaran and Donovan, because you kind of covered it in your excellent summary at the start when we talked about the season that was and how you rated it. For me, the biggest disappointment was the failure of those three big quarterbacks and their teams in the AFC. The fact that we had a playoffs without Lamar, without Joe Burrow, without Patrick Mahomes, like it certainly made for surprises and it made for a novel Super Bowl, or not novel, but one that we weren't expecting. But it did rob us of colour and drama, and it also robbed us of quality. I'm hoping Mahomes comes back for his injury, hoping that the Bengals can do right by Burrow, and hoping that Lamar, under a new coaching setup, will flourish into the Lamar that we knew of old, and hopefully is injury-free this season. But Ciaran O'Donovan, what was your biggest disappointment?
Yeah, I was thinking, and you could take your pick from those three teams, and it was always going to be, for me, one of those three teams. When you had to pick one, I picked the Bengals, because there was so much talk in the preseason about, are they going to secure T. Higgins? Are they going to secure Jamar Chase? Is Joe Burrow happy? Joe Burrow seems to be happy with his lot. Are they going to fix the defense? They got rid of their defensive coordinator, so if they fix the defense, they should be okay. If they even have a serviceable defense, after all that talk and they secured the offensive weapons, it was over before it started. We didn't even get a half a season out of the Bengals, and I know the turf toe, it took the wind out of their sails as well, and they did get off to was it 2-0 or 3-0? They went at the start of the season. That was great, but the Bengals again were a non-talking point when it came to the business end of the season, and that's not good enough when you've got who I think is possibly the most talented of those quarterbacks on your roster. I just think it was a flat-out disappointment, and I think that'll move on again into this season. It's going to be like Groundhog Day, talking about the Bengals again in the off-season and trades, and how are they going to fix this? How are they going to fix that? And is Joe Burrow, or insert QB's name, are any one of these guys going to get over the line in their career? Because there's just no guarantee that any of those guys are going to win a Lombardi.
Shane.
Somebody said the Giants. Oh no, wait, I probably shouldn't be saying that. I feel like I triggered too many. Now, to be honest with you, my real disappointment of the year, the 6-2 Buccaneers not making the playoffs. We just look at the first half of the season with Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield's playing some really good football, and Emeka Egbuka is lighting up things. Like they end October as 6-2 with a pretty convincing win against the Saints, and then really, really struggle. Only win 2 games over the course of November and December. I don't think that's being talked about enough. Like, they had the chance, and obviously the way the NFC South ended up, it was permutations upon permutations. It should have never even got to that stage. Like, they should have never had let the Panthers get in. There's so many close games which they really had the quality to go and take control of it, and they let it slip away. I know obviously there's injuries, particularly with Baker, that they had to deal with over the course of the season, but I don't know. I just feel like almost schematically, it was as if they had a really hot start to the season and they were figured out. Not unlike the Colts, but I think the Buccaneers to me are more disappointing because they were in a very winnable division and were in the driver's seat from early on with really good quarterback play, and it just completely collapsed. So they're my disappointment this season.
Ciaran Boyle.
Well, similar theme to the Buccaneers. My biggest disappointment was the Lions. We all love watching the Lions. We love the theater. We love the offensive, kind of flair that they bring to the game. A team that went 15-2 in 24 to finishing the season 9-8, last in the division, couldn't get past the Vikings, couldn't get past the Packers. Listen, we all know that they lost Johnson and they lost Aaron Glenn, but I thought there was still enough, in that team to do damage in that division. Hutchinson back healthy, obviously Sonic and Knuckles. You got Jameson Williams. You got all the stars. St. Brown on offense, but and not to forget Tesla, the electric car. But what really hampered them, and I kind of discussed it a little bit at the start, was the defensive frailty and the lack of depth. That secondary got smoked towards the end of the season. I mean, they finished the season 3-4. They flattered to deceive when they beat the Giants that OT game. The Jameis game, and it looked like they were going to make a charge into December, but losing 3 of the last 4 just put the nail in the coffin. And the defensive frailties they just couldn't overcome. I mean, Joseph, Brian Branch, when Terry and Arnold went out injured, they just didn't have the backups. They didn't have the skill players to put in there to absorb the hit. And obviously, the teams that had the stronger defense was able to kind of advance in that division. So that's Lions 25 is my biggest disappointment.
I'm going to put you back on the clock here on, because I want to know what's the thing you're watching for this off season as our noted college football and draft expert. What are you looking for?
How long you got? Well, I mean,
he's had his 6 cups of coffee now, ladies and gentlemen. He's ready to roll.
All in the one serving.
Oh yeah, keep them coming. There's a couple of players there's a couple of things I'm looking forward to. Obviously, as a Giants fan, looking forward to what Harbaugh can do and turn this team around. But I'm going to dip into the college world. There's a couple of players I want to highlight because they're going to be at least top 10, maybe top 20, and some possibly, we could be looking at offensive and defensive rookie of the year. I'm going to start with Caleb Downs, safety out of Ohio State, started with Alabama, now with Ohio State. If you've seen the rise of the 49ers, you're obviously, and even if you haven't, you're familiar with Ronnie Lott's game. Just an absolute monster, hitting machine. 6 foot. This guy is not overly powerful. He's not a Kyle Hamilton, big, tall dude, but he's just a hitting machine. He's fearless, fast as lightning, and he hits. I mean, if you see the footage of Ronnie Lott just putting his body out there in all situations, we're looking at a, kind of Jesse Bates, Kirby Joseph kind of safety, just a real bruiser. So I like him to go top 10. I mean, he's probably the best safety in the draft, so keep an eye out for him in the draft. Carnell Tate, the wide receiver, probably the best wide receiver in the class this year. 6'3", great hands. Kind of got lost with the Jeremiah Smith being the superstar of Ohio State. I really like him coming out. And a guy who had a really strong season with the Hurricanes with Messidor, but I'm going to go for Reuben Bain, a defensive end. South Florida seems to churn out defensive ends. You think of Brian Burns, from the Miami area, Jason Taylor, Jason Pierre-Paul, Calais Campbell. All these guys came out of the South Florida area, and Reuben Bain Jr. is probably going to go, if not top 15, top 20. He's going to be one of the top DNs in the draft. Just lightning fast. Him and Messidor on both flanks on the defensive end. I'm gonna put early projections as Tate and Reuben Bain as the offensive and defensive rookies of the year. I think there's just so much quality there. Again, we'll have time to talk about the draft down the line, but this is a draft that is more kind of focused on DNs, safeties, corners, that kind of stuff. So those are my 3 guys.
We're going to leave it there. Thanks very much for watching. That's your whole off-season coverage. Amazing. Love your work, Ciaran. Ciaran O'Donovan, what are you looking for in the off-season?
Just a couple of things. Number one, I'm intrigued to know where Malik Willis will end up. He's a guy that we saw a good few cameos from. As a Packers fan, I'd be disappointed to see him out of the building, and I was disappointed that he wasn't used more, that there weren't packages inserted for him late in the season. I want to see where he ends up, and I want to see what kind of an impact he has as a potential starter. Looking forward to Charlie Smith's second season in the league. I think he really proved that he's here, and he has the stuff that it takes to survive in this league. And and we've talked all year about kicking, and it is a battle of. It's a survival game at the start, and I think he can establish himself and have quite a successful career. And I'm so proud of what he accomplished this year. The big thing for me is how the Chiefs respond. We talked we had a conversation in the airport on the way home after the Super Bowl, and I kind of get a little bit not annoyed, but just a little bit frustrated at the fact that everybody assumes that the Chiefs and their dynasty are going to have another Indian summer because that's the script that the Patriots wrote. But that's the outlier. Like every other dynasty has risen and has fallen. And everybody is assuming that Mahomes and the Chiefs are going to come back at some point and get to and possibly win multiple more Super Bowls. I'm really interested to see how they bounce back. And I'm not putting it beyond them, but I just think it's more likely that they don't. I think it's more likely that Patrick Mahomes never plays in a Super Bowl again. And I don't think that's a drastic statement to make. And so I think I'm intrigued to see how they respond, because this was clearly, his lowest season since he started. He's been in how many?
It's not a drastic statement to make, and like I still think he probably will at some point. It may not actually be for the Chiefs, and I have a similar vision about Joe Burrow. I can imagine Joe Burrow playing a Super Bowl, but I don't think it's ever going to be for the Cincinnati Bengals because they just don't know what they're doing. That he's wasted there. But like to your point, and we've talked about this before, Tom Brady's career absolutely skews what people think is possible. That is an absolute massive outlier. That's probably never going to happen again, and it's a freak and a miracle that it did. He essentially had Bill Barnwell has brilliantly analysed this, 3 Hall of Fame careers in the one. It's just nuts. And even he went a long stretch without winning another Super Bowl. He didn't get to them, but he didn't win them. And arguably the best part of his career, which is the real brain teaser about the whole thing, it's already against the odds that Patrick Mahomes has played in as many Super Bowls as he has.
Yeah, and no other franchise has managed to build 2 dynasties within the span of one player's career. It's never happened before. It's a one-off in 60 years of Super Bowl, of Super Bowl history. So just to assume it, and I think a lot of the media does almost speak as if it's an assumption that this is just a down year or two for the Chiefs. So very interested to see how their season goes next season, and I'm sure they will be only delighted to prove me wrong. Because they're obviously listening right now. The whole
they're focused on you every way, as you always are. They're watching. Shane.
Well, firstly, it's funny. Kieran was talking about the debate in the airport. I was on the other side of that debate. I definitely think the Chiefs have plenty of life left in them, so long as Andy Reid is still coaching them. But we have a lot of time to talk about that. I think the biggest thing, and this is something you were touching on, Conor, it's just the biggest thing I'm looking out for is how the Rams start constructing their roster this year. Like, are they going all in this year? Are they thinking of what they're doing post Matt Stafford? They're the team with the 5th highest cap space to work with. I think it's roughly $40 million. So they have plenty of room to work. Not any major key areas they need to improve on immediately and start splashing the cash. Do they look to draft this year and develop, behind Matt Stafford for a year and try to bring in somebody else? Or, as I think could very well be the case, are they thinking about building the greatest show on surf with Joe Burrow next season, and trying to win it this year with Matt Stafford, and then maybe just thinking to have enough cash in the bank.
Selfishly, as a Bears fan, I do not want Joe Burrow in the NFC, but that is a sexy prospect.
Well, but think about it, because Joe Burrow isn't winning a Super Bowl in Cincinnati. I think we're all kind of agreed on that. That's because they just don't construct rosters well enough to do it. You put Joe Burrow in a situation where he's not where what he wants isn't what's done. It's what the head coach wants, and it's a very, very good head coach. So much so that the rest of the league can't help but keep picking off his coordinators and extending the tree to become the McVay coaching forest. That's how good that coaching system is and has been in the rounds for years, and it's probably still going to continue to be. I think Chris Shula, is going to be a fantastic head coach someday as well. So I think it's in LA. Remember the last time the Super Bowl was held in LA, they went for a sort of win now approach. And the years the rebuild in the doldrums lasted a few weeks. afterwards, because that's just how good they were at rebuilding the roster. So I'm just very interested to see when free agency comes along, when the draft comes along, are they making picks to win now, or are they making picks to keep themselves as competitive as they possibly can? Because really, they're a couple of plays away from winning the Super Bowl this year. They're very, very fine margins. They're a good enough team to do it. But then are they also thinking, let's not splash the cash because we're going to need some cash in the bank and some draft picks in the bank to maybe go for Joe Burrow next year? I think that's going to be intriguing over the course of the offseason.
Brian, what you got for us?
Before I do, I'd be stunned if the Rams were to move off the 2025 MVP quarterback in Matthew Stafford. But yeah, let's enjoy some wild trade rumors while we can have them. I'm going to be really selfish here, Conor. I know Kieran's alluded to, and I very rarely go down the Giants route. But I am going to shy away from this time.
Except for the time before you spent an hour talking about the Giants in San Francisco. But never mind.
That's where that was a dedicated podcast, Conor.
Well, it took a lot of dedication for the rest of us to get through it.
Well, look, do you know the good thing about that podcast was, Conor, and I put it out there, like Pat Leonard was absolutely on the money, because the Giants have now since brought in.
And I joke, of course, Pat Leonard is class act, and it was a great listen.
Yeah, Pat Leonard, New York Daily News, suggested that Joe Shane won't be the GM for long. And in fact, the changes in which the Giants are putting in place essentially is where Giant fans are up in arms because he wasn't removed of his services. Essentially, he has been removed of his services in a roundabout way, because if you read the speculation over the course of the last 2 days, we did a fantastic report from The Athletic by Ian O'Connor, who did a sit-down interview with John Harmer. Dawn Aponte, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her surname correctly, but essentially kind of she's now the one who everyone reports to, and then she reports to John Harbour. And now Joe Shane is essentially responsible for the scouting of players in particular around the draft. And I just think back to, and I know the Jets are dysfunctional, I think back to when Mike McCagnon managed the draft for the Jets, and then a week after the draft, they fired him. And I just wonder, had it joined so far down the road in terms of scrutinising players for the draft that they didn't feel it was the right move to do now. But I don't know if that storyline has finally been written, and would it surprise me if Joe Shane is gone after the draft and then a scouting team? No, I think Pat Leonard might be onto something there. As well as that, I'd be interested to see what the Giants do in free agency, because we're now going to see John Harbaugh type of signings as opposed to players that Joe Shane.
I'm also interested to see who the Giants ship out, because I think there's going to be a roster clear out coming there, and a couple of interesting players could come up for grabs. Yeah,
and I'll throw one more where we're talking about mad permutations. Tyreek Hill back to the Jets. Back to the Chiefs. Is that against the Rams' possibility? Because like Andy Reid seems to be the kind of head coach that can get the best out of him. They moved off him for the reasons at the time, but it kind of might be the right fit to bring him back this time around.
Yeah, and maybe Rashee Rice out the door. I wonder, has he burned the last of his bridges there? We shall see. Ciaran O'Donovan, our final point for the recap. Football guy of the year. Who's your football guy of the year?
There's no point in asking anybody else, because this has already been presented. On Friday night in San Francisco, Adam Rank walked into the bar and presented Craig Rigdon, our very own Craig Rigdon, with the San Francisco MVP award. And for all of the content we put out, and we listened to Craig, we watched Craig Rigdon produce it. And when we were finished, when we had our heads in our hands at 4:00, Craig was only starting to make the magic. So he was putting those thumbnails.
Right. If you're watching this, Shane Brennan just did a Dumbledore clap, which will mean the world to Craig Rigdon.
And shout out
right now. And I just flashed his comment on the screen there.
Craig O'Rigdon. You give him his full name.
Craig O'Rigdon. Never saw an Englishman so uncomfortable as he was in the Irish consulate as well, by the way. Yeah,
I was kind of getting used to it in the end. Like, he had a Belfast coffee, and that seemed to take the edge off.
Absolutely. So, and shout out to Ben Costello while we're at it as well. So the AV club was absolutely on full force in San Francisco. So yeah, football guy of the year for me was Craig Rigdon in all his football stat glory as well. A great company and a great guy as well.
Yeah, knocked it out of the park. I'm sure I'm going to leave the floor open for anyone who wants to follow that. Is there another candidate for football guy of the year before we wrap?
Cam Scatterbar.
Tim Hart, CBS.
I'm actually going to throw a head coach in there, Conor. Liam Cohen. Last July, Duval, everybody was absolutely ripping him and the Jags for being a dysfunctional organisation. Well, no one's ripping them now, and we saw him firsthand in Radio Row walking around with a bit of swagger, and he deserves it for the accolades. Like, they're so close to beating the Bills in the playoffs, and like, he proved himself. He proved everyone wrong.
He was my honourable mention because he told Robert Saleh to keep his name out of his mouth as well, which I think of Will Smith when I hear those words. But chest out moment.
I gotta say, by the way, like I do mean football guy of the year in the most inclusive fashion, and we're not, exclusively applying it to the patriarchy. There's lots of people we could throw in this category, including great.
He's been cut off. Oh, Jesus. This is the key moment. We're about to figure out what it was.
The broadband just give up at the moment.
Oh, it's gone again.
That's going to look really bad now.
Football guy of the year won't be Conor's broadband provider. Is he coming back to us?
He's gone. No. He's gone. He's completely just. There we go. He's back.
I'm back. Back in the room. What did I miss? So I guess get cut off at the most inopportune moment.
We are in suspense. We don't know what you were giving us. Go again.
No, I was just going to say that, I don't know where you lost me, but that I did mean football guy of the year in the most inclusive sense and not just in an exclusively patriarchal sense. There was lots of people we could put in this category, including lots of people we had in the show at the Moscone Centre, including Jordan Rodriguez, great friend of the show, Lindsay Rose and others. I'd throw them all into that category as well. So don't think we're being exclusive in making that award. My football guy of the year, and I just wanted to throw this one out there, Justin Fields, and we mentioned it at the time. When he got thrown under the bus by Jets owner Woody Johnson, didn't have a great season, had a couple of terrible games after actually an admittedly quite promising start in game one, which just goes to show you how week one can throw you a head fake. Was a terrible thing for Woody Johnson to do, and I thought Justin Fields was very brave and vulnerable to talk about what that felt like for him and how upset he was and what a difficult week he'd had. When he came out, turned it around and won the following game, he could have put that behind him and he could have just toughed it out or manned it out, but he didn't. I thought that was a real classy display of and difficult display of vulnerability on a national stage there. And fair play to him for discussing how he struggled with his mental health and how that put him in the blender and how he made his way back from it with the support of his friends and his family, chiefly his mother and his sister. I thought that was a different take on football guy of the year for me.
I've got three. Firstly, Matt Sims for teaching me how to throw a football. That was pretty cool. That man
not over yet. You still haven't learned.
He gave me one lesson, and I'm terrible. It's fine. I got to snap. My arm position is completely gone. But he tried. He saw a man.
Point that toe, son. Point that toe.
he saw a man who clearly just does not have an arm. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna.
Kieran Boyle, you're like Peyton Manning in that great SNL sketch. Are you trying to lose? Go in the Portaloo. Shut the door.
Sorry, I love the game too much.
Yeah, it's all fair. Yeah, I know. Yeah, people who do love the game should hate my throwing. That is completely fair. And then two people. Look, obviously, the fact that I got to be in the stadium when my team played the Super Bowl obviously comes down to one. I'll give it to Mike Vrabel, obviously for his sort of football guy, Warriors and all the rest. A hell of a job done. But to of course the Irish NFL show crew at large. Of which it would not be possible. But a particular shout out to Brian, because Brian is the only reason why I actually have a SIM card that I can use to call people on the phone. He's the only person I call on like a regular basis. Everybody else I text or I WhatsApp or I Instagram. But no, Brian's on the phone. He's like that's the only way you get to Brian. You get to speak to him about anything.
I work the phones, guys. I work the phones. I'm like a GM.
My love extends to everybody, but my phone bill extends to Brian.
What's up? You started off with Matt Sims and you ended up with SIM cards. That was a lovely little segue, and that is our final segue of the 2025 season review. As we said, we'll be back with you very soon. We're taking a break from the live streams, but we will have podcast content coming at you. So check out our social channels for updates there, and keep tuning in on whatever social platform on which you are, podcast platform on which you pick us up on the Irish NFL Show.